If you enjoy this video, please consider giving a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. And if you have any ideas for future videos, share them in the comments section below. This original bedtime story is made possible thanks to Slumberland patrons. If you would like to support this channel, you can find Patreon details in the description and on my channel homepage. So just take a moment to allow your eyes to close and allow yourself to begin to relax. And as you begin to comfortably drift asleep, I'm just going to tell this sleep story in the background. And while I tell this sleep story, I don't know whether you'll drift asleep faster to the sound of my voice or whether it'll be to the spaces between my words. And as you drift comfortably asleep, you can just have a sense of a person walking through a meadow. And as this person walks through this meadow, they're just ambling along. They can notice the clouds overhead, noticing the way that they're moving gently across the sky. They can notice the way the grass and the plants move in the meadow as the wind occasionally blows a little breeze. They can feel that breeze on their cheeks and each footstep that they take. And yet, at the same time, they have a vague sense of being lost. But they're comfortable with this. They've just never really explored this area before. They kind of know the route they came. They know they can safely find their way back. But they don't really know where they are right now. And so they continue to just roam around, exploring, enjoying the environment, taking in the sounds, the sights, the smells of the different flowers. And as they explore in this meadow, so they can notice a curious bird flying off in the distance. And the way that bird is singing seems to almost lull them towards it. And so they start to follow, they start to head towards that bird. And as they head comfortably towards that bird, so they notice the way that it occasionally seems to turn around and manage to hover gently in the air, as if to check that they're still following, before turning back and carrying on flying. And after a while, they follow that bird towards the tree line at the far side of this meadow, and then into the woodland. And as they follow that bird into the woodland, so the bird's song seems to almost echo. And they can tell which direction that song's coming from. They follow that sound of the bird deeper and deeper into the woodland. And they're curious about this bird. And eventually, deep in the woodland, they find a fallen down tree and an ever so slight clearing where that tree has fallen, where some sunlight is breaking into the centre of this woodland. And that bird is just sitting there, jumping around a little bit. And the person heads over, slowly, carefully, quietly, towards that bird. Not wanting to disturb that bird, not wanting to scare that bird off, make it fly away. And it's a small little bird, the most beautiful wings, the most beautiful plumage. and they sit down gently next to the bird, sitting down on the trunk of that fallen down tree. And as they sit down, so the bird gently hops over to them and hops up onto their leg. And as it hops up onto their leg, so they begin to have this sense of almost like an energy field emanating from the bird. And then within a moment, they start to have this almost psychic connection with the bird. And they realize this bird is communicating with them. And somehow they understand the bird. And so they are looking at that bird on their leg, and that bird is looking back at them. And they can hear with their ears that the bird is singing. But with their mind, they can hear the bird talking, and they can understand that talking. And the bird says that I'm a life bond bird. I find a human, and I connect with that human. And there are various life bond animals, some dogs, some cats, and some other animals, where we bond for life with a human. We can communicate psychically with that human. But what I'm here for now isn't just to bond with you, it's to ask you for help. And the person thinks to themselves, what help could you possibly require from me? And the bird says that there's an unsettled dragon that's looking for peace, that requires your help. And the person was curious about this, while at the same time being unsure, not really believing in dragons. But at the same time, they didn't believe that a bird could talk, let alone be psychic, until a moment ago. And the alternative to believing that this is real was something they'd rather not believe right now. So they ask the bird where they have to go, what they have to do. And the bird flies off of their leg and begins to fly deeper and deeper into the woodland. And they walk along following that bird as it easily weaves and dodges branches, while they're trying hard to push through those branches. And deep in the woodland, they discover a tall, shiny, black obelisk with symbols on all the sides. And the bird lands in a tree near this obelisk. And the person asks what they're supposed to do. What does this mean? And the bird says, reach out and just touch the obelisk. So they reach out, and gently with their fingertips, they touch that obelisk. And as they do, a blue light begins to illuminate the symbols on the obelisk. Then almost like an electric effect, begins to travel up from the ground, up the sides, up to the top, with a crackling, sparking sound, before firing from the top up high into the sky. And the person notices, as it fires high into the sky, that it seems to be separating the clouds, almost puncturing through the sky, and a dome begins to appear around them. And the person looks up and watches as that dome is arcing overhead, arcing and lowering down to the ground, almost like somebody's pouring chocolate on top of a cake and watching it pour around the sides. And they watch as that dome forms all around them. And as soon as the dome has formed, so the obelisk goes quiet, and the dome has a glow to it. And then moments later, that dome begins to turn dark, almost like nighttime is setting in, and stars begin to appear on that dome. And the person gazes up, thinking it almost looks like gazing up at a night sky. And then as that night time descends on this area, so the woodland seems to evaporate and fade away, with just the obelisk standing. And in front of the person, they can see a slow, deep breathing dragon. The most powerful looking green dragon, with strong wings and legs, just lying there, curled on the ground, its head resting across the ground, with deep puffs with each breath, and a warmth from each breath. And the person begins to walk towards that dragon, a little apprehensively at first, and the bird flies to the person's shoulder, stands on the person's shoulder, as they walk towards that dragon. And as they reach the dragon, they notice its eyes gently look up in their direction. And the person picks up that this dragon appears lost, as the dragon's eyes look back down again. They gently run their hand down the neck of the dragon. They can feel the warmth emanating from the neck of that dragon. They can feel the scales under their fingertips, under the palm of their hand. They run the hand all the way down to the body and down to the shoulder of one of the wings. They ask the bird, "How can I help this dragon?" And the bird says that this dragon needs to find peace, that for some time now they've been overcome with anger and with things that they have done while angry. And it wasn't their fault that they were angry. They were controlled by an evil wizard. And they're still being controlled by that evil wizard. And that's why they appear so despondent here. They know what they're going to do at any given moment. And the person asks, well, why didn't they attack me if they're so angry? And the bird says that it's likely because the wizard hasn't registered that there's anyone here as far as the wizard's concerned. This dragon's here in this land, just resting here, before they're going to send it to attack more villages and attack more villagers and be their weapon of destruction. But there are also no humans here in this land. There are various types of beings, but no humans. And so it could be that the wizard just hasn't detected anything about you as a being. And you're here in this land, having accessed it through that obelisk, where the obelisk has transported you from one location in one realm to another location in another realm. And perhaps that's how you're to defeat the wizard and help to break the curse and bring peace to the dragon. That the wizard can't detect you because you're not of this realm. And so maybe that will give you the element of surprise. And so the person asks where the wizard is. And the bird says the wizard is up in the mountains. And so the person begins trekking away from the dragon, unsure exactly how they're going to defeat the wizard, what they're going to be able to do, but treks away from the dragon and can just make out the outline of the peaks of the mountains by the lack of starlight, almost like a crooked break in the lower part of the night sky, where the stars just end. And the bird and the person head to the mountains and begin to ascend. And they reach a height where the bird says that they can't fly any higher, and so the bird rests on the person's shoulder as they continue ascending higher and higher. And when they're near the peak of the mountain, the person can see what looks like some kind of temple. And there's a glow coming from within the temple. And so they carefully and quietly head into that temple. And they walk quietly as their eyes adapt to that low glow. And as they walk quietly into the temple, they can see symbols around the walls. They can see a library of books. And they can notice a wizard chanting over a pool of water. And as they're chanting over that pool of water, so a purple mist is rising from the pool. And as they sneak around to try and get a closer look, while keeping out of the sight of the wizard, they notice that it looks like an image of a village in that pool of water. And the bird telepathically tells the person that the wizard is in the process of connecting the dragon's next destruction with that village. And the person wonders what they could possibly do to help and to stop a wizard when they're just a human. And just then, they have an idea. And they walk out very confidently, talking to face that wizard. And the wizard is taken aback, taken by surprise. The wizard didn't hear anyone coming, didn't sense anyone coming, and had never met a human before. And the person carried on talking, while the wizard is still wondering who this being is, and not understanding them. And they walked towards that wizard. And as they got nearer and nearer to the wizard, they were passing by some pillars that had bowls on top, with coal in the bowls and flames coming out of those bowls. And these bowls seemed to be around the outside of that pool of water, as if to make this area somehow magical or sacred or special in some way. And as they walked past one of the bowls, they intentionally knocked the pillar in the direction of the pool of water, and the bowl and the coals fell into that pool of water. The purple mist turned to flames and then burnt out. And the pool started looking just like a pool of ordinary water that was bubbling with the heat of the coals. And the wizard screamed out in anger as the person ran out the way and hid behind a pillar. And the wizard began searching angrily for this person. And the bird was still across the other side of the room, keeping out of sight. But that meant that the bird was able to have a view of what's going on. They were small enough to not be noticed, and all of the wizard's attention was on trying to find the human, not on trying to sense a small animal in the room. But that bird having a telepathic connection with the human meant that they were able to always keep the person one step ahead of the wizard as the wizard explored and tried to find the human. And when they got the chance, they ran out, they knocked another pillar, knocking more coals and flame into the pool, and then headed off and hid. And then they ran out and did it with the third pillar. And this time the wizard managed to catch a glimpse of them and fired out a burst of flames from the palm of their hand in the direction of the person, who managed to avoid it and get hidden again. And this person knew this was just a temporary fix, that all this was doing was preventing the dragon getting angry now. They hadn't yet figured out how to help that dragon find peace. But they hoped that perhaps all of the control this wizard had over the dragon is done via that pool. So if they can ruin the pool, maybe they can stop the wizard having the control, even if the dragon is still under the wizard's spell, at least for a while. And then they ran past and knocked down the last pillar, with the last coals and flames falling in the pool. And then they grabbed the book the wizard was using to cast the spell. They threw that into the pool. And the wizard ran out and lunged at them and pushed that person over. The person rolled on the ground. The wizard came over and held the hand out while standing on the person's chest with one foot. And the hand had flames twirling around it. And the wizard looked incredibly angry. And the person couldn't understand what the wizard was saying, but imagined that this wizard was asking who they are, what they're doing here, why they've done what they've done. And then as they drew back their hand, ready to thrust it forward and send a pulse of flames at the person, the bird came out of nowhere and flew at the wizard's face, blocking the view of the wizard with its wings. And as the wizard moved their hands to brush away at the bird, the person rolled out the way and ran out of the temple and back into the mountains. The bird came out and joined them, as the two of them tried disappearing into the night here on the mountains. They could hear that wizard following them. They started heading down the mountain, with the sound of the wizard behind them, continuing to head deeper and deeper down that mountain, heading back towards the dragon, wondering how they can help this dragon, what they can do. The bird was right that the human had an element of surprise, but the person didn't know what to do next. They just knew that they had to get back to the dragon and away from that wizard. And eventually they managed to make it all the way back to the dragon. And they could see that dragon still lying there despondent on the ground. And they went over to the dragon. They tried looking at the dragon in the eye and asking for, "What can I do to help?" But the dragon never responded. Then the wizard appeared and was walking towards them. And the person tucked themselves behind the dragon and was walking along the side of the dragon, keeping the dragon between themselves and the wizard. They could see, as they peered over the dragon, the wizard's hand with a flame around it. And the wizard was still talking and saying things the person couldn't understand. And then as they were walking around the dragon, sliding a hand along the dragon while they walked, suddenly the dragon flinched and tucked just into the back of one of the dragon's legs was what looked like a really sharp splinter. And it was as the person touched that splinter that caused the dragon to flinch. And so they carefully took a look at this splinter and realized there was a very slight bit of purple smoke seeming to be coming from the splinter, coming from the wound. And they pulled with all their might to pull that splinter out from the dragon. And as they were pulling and pulling on that splinter, so the wizard was walking around the dragon. And the dragon was becoming more and more tense and beginning to shake and vibrate as if it was causing it pain having that splinter being pulled. And that wizard was walking around the dragon. And then all of a sudden, the splinter came out in the person's hand as they stumbled back and fell to the ground. And as it came out, so the dragon let out a massive roar, stretching its neck, its head, and a burst of intense fire travelled from its mouth, seeming to shoot across the land as far as the eye could see. And then the dragon went quiet, its head fell down, and that wizard was nowhere to be seen. And then the dragon did a few deep, comfortable breaths, and the night began to change to day. And then the dragon's breathing normalized, and it sat itself up gently, and it turned its head to the person, bowed its head to them, and let them stroke its nose while looking them in the eye. And the person realized that they've now just helped this dragon find inner peace that they were seeking. And not only have they helped the dragon to find inner peace and to no longer be unsettled, but they've prevented any further harm happening to villages or villagers or anyone else in this land from that wizard. And the bird flew and landed on their shoulder and said, "It's time for us to head back to the woodland. You've shown that you're worthy of being supported and worthy of my life bond. And I'll always be there for you. Sometimes you'll just hear me, other times you'll see me, but you'll know I'm always there. And we can always communicate mind to mind." And the person walked back to the obelisk, touched that obelisk. As they did, so the sky began to change, and everything around them began to change. And they found themselves back in that woodland. And as they found themselves back in that woodland, so the ground began to rumble and the obelisk began to lower down into the ground. And once it had fully lowered into the ground, it was as if the ground was swallowing it as that ground closed in on top of it. And this person had this feeling almost like the trees were singing and talking to him. As the two of them head back out into the meadow. And the person said to the bird, "I don't know where I am. I don't know the best way home." And the bird said, "The sound of my voice will guide you. You can just follow the sound of my voice and you'll be on the right path." And then the bird flew off. And the person had this sense of the sound of the bird's voice and followed that sound through the meadow and found their way back and headed all the way home. And once home, they settled down, thinking about the bizarre experience they'd had when they just went out for a walk in a place they'd never been before. And they felt that perhaps it was some kind of a dream. Maybe they're a bit dehydrated while they're out and about. They were trying to rationalize it and make sense of it. But as they were trying to rationalize it and make sense of it, they were sat in their back garden in the evening as the sun was setting, eating some food, drinking some drink. That bird appeared, landed on the table next to them, and began to telepathically communicate with them. And they realized the whole experience was real and had happened. And that night, they drifted and floated so peacefully asleep, curious about any future adventures that they might embark on with that bird, and what this life bond with this bird means to their future as they comfortably and relaxed drifted asleep.